The opinions expressed in this show are the views of the host and not necessarily that of WTRW, 94.3 The Talker, or the Bold Gold Media Group.
The following presentation is brought to you by the host of the program, who is solely responsible for its content.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Make a Change. I'm your host, Terry Martin, along with my wonderful producer, Tom Jenkins.
What do you want? Why are you kissing my butt?
Because I need your help.
Well, good afternoon, Terry.
Good afternoon. Our show today is going to be very fun, Tom, because Tom never has any idea who is coming on or what we will be talking about, and I just love to watch his face.
It's fun for me too, because I don't like to. I like to fly by the seat of my pants on a lot of aspects,
and we will be.
And this is a lot of fun. So what's in store for us today?
So I know today we'll get Tom's attention.
Why?
And because this is so interesting, it's topics that I think maybe you haven't heard, but at my age, I was just very surprised when I talked to our guest about autism and mental health, and it's
okay.
And I really do hope that you'll get something out of it, like I did in just a half an hour with this man.
I always get something out of these shows. Always.
I mean, we'll be on an hour today. I mean, just in the interview when I talked with him.
Sure.
But I just really hope that the audience that's listening gets as much out of it as I did. Now, today, in welcoming Dr. Dan Edmunds to our show, Make a Change, I just want to tell you how this came about, because I was reading an article in the Independent Gazette. And do you know what that newspaper that is, Tom?
Lou Jasikoff, yes. Sanity Check, yes. I know the Independent Gazette very well, yes.
Well, it's the truth, and he writes the truth in there. And this is free every 2 weeks. Anyone can get it. This isn't an ad for him, but in a way it is. I wish everyone would pick up that newspaper. But today, instead of me trying to explain about Dr. Dan Edmunds, let's just get right into letting him give an explanation about what he does, and you can just go on from there, and then I'll
just pick it up. So before we get rolling on that, first, I always like to say this: thank you for being part of the show and for coming in this afternoon.
Yes, thank you.
So who are you? Why are you here?
Well, I work as a psychotherapist, existential psychoanalyst, and an autism specialist. And I tend to have a very different approach towards the concepts of mental health and autism, and I have looked at trying to make reforms in those areas in trying to offer something that is more dignified to persons.
When I was talking about that newspaper earlier, I found, as I say, Dr. Edmunds' article in there, and when we sat down to have him explain it to me, I found out also that he is an author of 2 books, and the first one was called Meeting Two Persons. I love that title. But this one is about what therapy should be. And if you could explain that book a little more.
What I was trying to discuss in the Meeting of Two Persons was that oftentimes I see within the mental health system that there is a focus on solely how a person behaves, but the experience of that individual becomes ignored. And I think it's very important for us to be able to embrace a person's experience. So I explored that area, and then I also looked at some of the dynamics that leads people to breakdown. So a lot of these factors are social, political, familial issues, and I think that sometimes that gets ignored as well. So I wanted to really emphasize those things.
You also wrote another book, and if you could tell us about that one, and I'm struggling here to find the title, I'll let you.
Being Autistic, an Approach Towards Understanding and Acceptance. And basically that book was to discuss approaches to supporting autistic persons that would be embracing to them and also taking the input of self-advocates.
When it comes to autistic, I just am not familiar with that, because as we grew up, it didn't seem that there were that many autistic people. And my lack of understanding or any knowledge about autism, maybe you could explain, if you would, the definition more of what autism is.
Well, I think we have to differentiate that a lot of people, and this is what is kind of put out there, but it's this information is of course put out by groups that are not made up of autistic persons. So you have these ideas that autism is this terrible, dreaded disease, that it's a thing, that it's something that needs to be altered, and that's really not the situation. What I look at it is that it is a developmental difference, and autism is a culture. So you have people who are behaving in different ways, that they are perceiving the world in a different way. They tend to be more sensitive to the environments around them.
More sensitive than we even are.
Right.
If you don't
but this is not something that needs to be eradicated. This is a mode of being. This is who they are. So we have to find ways of just supporting them. So I've made the comparison that if I'm an American citizen and I travel to a foreign country and I don't know anything about the culture and I don't know the language, I'm going to have a rough time functioning within that realm. So the problem isn't that I'm an American. The problem is that I don't understand the culture and the language around me. So I look at it the same way for autistic people, is that the approach should be to help them to navigate through the mainstream. So like I said, it's not that the issue is that they are autistic, it's that they have this difference, and then we have to support them in being able to understand the mainstream culture and the language of others.
Why do you think, Terry had mentioned it earlier, saying that, when we were growing up, we didn't hear about autism
at all. That's a good question.
But now it's like you're hearing a lot about it. Is just people weren't aware of it, or how did this all come to fruition?
I think there's a lot of theories in that regard. I don't think anyone has a complete answer to that, but part of it I also look at is reclassification. So things have changed now, but there used to be what was called pervasive developmental disorder. So anyone who had some type of developmental quirk could be put into that category. So it made it look like there is this huge number of people within the spectrum. I think also in the past that a lot of those that were classified to have some type of intellectual disability later got reclassified as being into the autism spectrum. But I think that's an important thing that we have to look at too, is that just because a person is autistic doesn't mean that they are lacking in intelligence. But in the past, that wasn't, and even still today, that wasn't an assumption, and a false assumption that was often made about them.
Are there different types of autism?
Well, yes, they do call it a spectrum. There's a wide range of how autistic people may interact and function within the world, and how they behave. So I think we have to look at that too. That some people automatically they hear this term and they think that every autistic person is going to be the same, and they're going to behave the same, and they're going to think the same, which is not true at all.
My thoughts in the past were on autism. I guess I just didn't even give it that much thought, but they're so highly intelligent, many are. And so when you're talking about that spectrum, that's what you're saying. And I think we need a little more explanation, if you could, of that, how when we see autistic people, we're not treating them right, because we're not giving them the respect because they do understand the way that we are
That's correct.
treating them.
And I think, and I've often said that I think that we have to be careful with the terminology that we use. For me, I often hear people say, well, this person they have autism, or they're with autism. But when we say that, it's kind of like we are identifying that they have this thing that we have to eliminate. And then I often hear people say, for some autistic people, that they're nonverbal. I prefer to use the term pre-verbal, which recognizes the potential within them to be able to do that at some point in time. And just because a person is not speaking does not mean that they are not communicating. So I look at that as a very important part of my approach, is that we have to look at behavior as a form of communication. So I see that, unfortunately, in a lot of the programs that are out there, it's not really looking at behavior as a form of communication. It's looking at, okay, we're going to manipulate these behaviors and try to make this person into some concept of whatever normality is, whatever that term may be. And I think that's a very wrong approach.
Now, if a mother and father, parents, wanted to come to you and they had an autistic child, where would you begin? And in it also, I do have one other question about your book. Is that mainly for a parent? Is that for the public to understand more? What is your book mainly aiming towards?
It's kind of just information to give to people in general, so that they have an understanding of how to interact with these persons and what autism is about. But there's also some guidance given that parents and others can actually utilize to help support the person.
When we talked, you were saying how some people will see a child rocking and they don't understand that, but you said it actually can be a sign they are happy.
Right. So I think that's what we have to tune into, is, okay, rather than going through this process of, okay, we have to suppress these behaviors or eradicate these behaviors, we have to look at, okay, and go through a process of interpretation of, this is language. They are saying something to us by these actions that they are doing. What are they trying to tell us? And then we have to be able to have the proper response to that.
Is that what you meant earlier when you said embrace a person's behavior?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So their behavior,
to look at behavior as a form of communication, as a language. So part of my work initially would be to try to gain that understanding, to go through this process of interpreting what they are doing and what it means, and responding to them. So I have to be able to enter their world. And I think that's part of the problem, is that too many programs are more based on forcing them to come into our world. So I think it's in reverse. I have to go into theirs.
Yes, that's what I really liked in your article, because you said you have to go down their journey with them.
Right.
That's a great, definitely. I now understand what you meant when you said I look at things differently, and I do things differently with autism. I want to get back more into that, and if you can describe more. We're going to take a quick break, but when we do come back, how we can get into their world a little bit better and help communicate with them, and vice versa. Okay. So you are listening to Make a Change. I am Tom Jenkins with your host, Terry Martin. Our guest today is Dr. Dan Edmunds. We're talking about autism and a whole new way to look at it, and hopefully it'll help you get to understand it a little bit better. And we are going to take a break. We'll be right back on 94.3 FM, The Talker. Mederi Clinicals, a unique skincare company, has a complete skincare line for men and women. From anti-aging to glycolic, and even a clinical line for sensitive skin, Mederi Clinicals is for you. Their #1 product? Forgiveness. It's the secret to younger looking and younger acting skin. You can experience the transformation with fewer wrinkles, firmer skin, and a more youthful, radiant complexion. Treat aging, sun damage, rosacea, and more with forgiveness. Plus, buy 1 bottle of Forgiveness, get 1 lip enhancing complex for free. Forgiveness. Apply it morning and night and keep forgiving and forgetting all through the day. Make a change with Mederi Clinicals. Balance, restore, look, and feel new. Mederi Clinicals, a complete skincare company for men and women. Call 866-646-3374 or check out MederiClinicals.com. MEDERI Clinicals.com. Welcome back to Make a Change on 94.3 FM The Talker. I am Tom Jenkins, along with your host of Make a Change, Terry Martin. And the show, Make a Change, is obviously all about making changes in your life, whether it be with your weight, with your attitude, with your surroundings. You know, Terry always brings in wonderful guests to help everybody make a change somewhere in their life. And today we have a wonderful guest, Dr. Dan Edmunds, who is helping us learn how to change our views, not really our views, but get more of an understanding when it comes to mental health and specifically autism. And last segment we were talking about a really cool way, and I like how you described that, Doctor, was that so many are trying to change the autistic person to come to our world when it would be easier, do you think, for us to get into their world? And the communication could be better, the understanding could be better, and that's where the changes could be made.
Right.
You know, and the thought I had on break was these children in school and the bullying. I mean, how does this work? Are there classes that can help educate all of us better, because we do need it?
I do think that's an important thing that needs to be more developed as well, is being able to have kind of programs for peer education, because I have seen that where many autistic children have gone through some pretty brutal circumstances within the school because based on just a total lack of understanding.
So do you by any chance give seminars to any educational schools, or do you put anything on in your office that people could
I have given lectures to various parent organizations and so forth. I have not done this, but I certainly would, and I think, as I said, it's definitely something that needs to happen. It is more in the way of peer education. Could you give us your email information right now, or how anyone could contact you if they wanted you to do any of this? My email, batushkad@yahoo.com. I have a website on selfgrowth.com, so if you go there and you type in my name, it will come up, and that has a number of articles, interviews, and other information. And your office, you have 2 offices? There's 2 places that I work out of, yes. One is in Tunkhannock and the other is in Kingston.
Now, we were talking earlier about the person rocking, and you said that might not be a bad thing, that could be a good thing. That's them communicating to us that they're happy, or whatever the case may be. Right. What are some examples that you could give of misdirected communication by non-autistic people when they look at autistic people, and maybe help us get a better understanding on that? Well, I think that there are many times where those that are not autistic they may encounter a person and they are engaged in some particular behavior, so whether it be rocking or some form of self-stimulation. So they're assuming, okay, well, this person is angry, or they are having some particular difficulty, and then they're trying to, do something to them to say, okay, well, this is not an acceptable behavior to us, so we're going to shut that down. You mean they could even be punishing them when when it's wrong? When actually this person, maybe they are trying to convey to us that there is some distress in their environment. So maybe they're in a room and the room happens to be too warm, but they can't tell us that, so they are doing some type of self-stimulation of whatever kind to indicate their distress. So as I said, I think that's
the very important thing is to really tune in to what are they trying to tell us by what they're doing, rather than just saying, okay, this is not acceptable, make it go away.
How can we find out? Like, how can we learn about these behaviors?
Well, I think it's first by establishing an emotional connection with them. That once we do that we kind of create this space where we're journeying together, then we can begin to have that understanding. But I also think that we have to be willing to say that sometimes we could be wrong. Mm-hmm. That, all right, maybe our interpretation that we're not always getting it. But that's okay. At least we're making that effort and we're trying to be embracing.
Do you think that autistic people many times are drugged down also, and so they can't even express themselves? Do you think that sometimes, because this world, it just seems that even if it's mental health, which we will get into, and the other part?
Yes. Well, I don't think it just goes for autistic people. I think that other situations too, people who are going through some type of distress, that tends to be kind of the climate now, is rather than to try to guide the person through, it's a system of suppression. That, okay, we're just going to numb the person and not really deal with the roots of what is going on.
Now he's talking my language. I agree with that tremendously, and I see that happen so many times with people. I mean, I'm going through that with not a close family member, but right now, and I'm trying to talk to her and trying to help her, and she just wants to be medicated. But the problems aren't going to go away.
Right.
You know, they're still going to be there.
Mm-hmm. And my thought about autism, is it because maybe parents are having a hard time, or they just don't know how to deal with it, so that's the way they suppress it, instead of doing what you're saying, walking that journey. Right. I know that they do it, like Tom was saying, in the mental health side of it, but I just wondered on these children that really just want to live, and in their mind, are they kind of, you know, they're intelligent, but they're just stuck in this body, and
right,
and they really have, they're as intelligent as anyone else, but they can't get it out. Is that what it is? Most of it, or is it again that every case is different?
Well, like I said, I think it's a wide range, and you can't say that every autistic person is going to be the same.
But many we may not be given enough credit to because of our lack of knowledge. Right. When you talked about this lulu.com, is this where we can get? That's where I have my books. The Being Autistic book is an ebook, and the other is Meeting of Two Persons, is available in print. So this is the only way that anyone can get your book, is by going online. That's right. Okay.
What made you want to write these books?
The Meeting of Two Persons actually started as a paper that I had presented at a conference, and it was based on that I found it very important, because just from what I saw, that I saw how that the system was not paying attention to the experience of individuals, that it was more focused on just categorization of behavior. So I thought it was important to address that, and I do think that that's a sad thing, that if you go today, if you have a person who is in any type of distress, they may be seen for, if they're lucky, 10 to 15 minutes, and it's not going to be, okay, what did you experience? What have you gone through? It's going to be more of, how are you behaving? What are your so-called symptoms? Then you're assigned a label, and you're going to come out of there with a prescription for something. And I don't feel that that's really the effective way of addressing things. I think that we have to be more introspective and go deeper. And And I've said that psychotherapy itself, literally, it means the healing of the soul. But I kind of look at that the soul has left the whole system of affairs.
You said that you wrote an article, or you wrote many articles for Psychology Today.
Right. I did have a number of articles that I wrote on their online site.
Was that more on the mental health or autism?
The title of it was Extreme States of Mind. So I was addressing a lot with those who would be labeled with some type of a psychotic disorder, and looking at alternative approaches to supporting those individuals.
You also told me that the way your education is what makes you think probably different than most doctors do.
Well, in the beginning, as an undergrad, I was a comparative religion major, and I had this interest in examining the belief systems of various groups. And I had a curiosity as to how people construct meaning in their lives and the narratives that they create. And I believe that if I would have just initially started from the beginning in the behavioral sciences realm, that I would have had a very different viewpoint. But I think because of my initial background, that it opened me to wanting to explore and examine the experience of persons more, and see, okay, how do they look upon life itself? And sadly, that's what I found, that even through the studies that I went through, that it was very entrenched in this biological model, this medical model, and that was kind of what was thrown at you. And many did not question any of this. And I'll have to admit, initially, I didn't question, because it was just what was laid out. But it was direct encounters with persons and seeing how that this model was really sometimes not very helpful to people, that's when I began to develop more of a critical thought about the way my field sometimes operates.
What pushed you more towards autism being your specialty?
I had some initial encounters with autistic persons where I was able to help and support them. And then I did unfortunately see some of the programs where I saw that these persons were not being treated in very dignified ways, and I started to really think critically there as well, and say, okay, what exactly is the objective here? What are they trying to do for
what
these
do you
people?
mean there? The way that they were treated, was that through study, or you mean out on the street, the way they were?
Well, sometimes in school programs.
What would that be that
I would
you didn't think was dignified?
What I sometimes notice is that it was a pattern of behavioral manipulation. So they would give them repetitive drills to go through. And then I began to look at it, that I saw that the objective seemed to be to alter them into something that they are not, nor need to be, or can be. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was... I got to the point where I looked at some of these programs, and I thought this was kind of dehumanizing to them to some degree. So I began to take more interest, and then over time, what I noticed too is that a lot of the groups that are out there that speak about autism do not have autistic people within these organizations. So that was something I began to connect with as well, is the autistic rights movement and those that are self-advocates. And I think if we're going to learn anything about the autistic experience, it has to come from those that are autistic. And so there's a number of groups out there that self-advocates run, and I think that we need to be really tuning in more to their message than all of these other groups.
Got to stop you there for a second. I'm going to take a quick break. How would people get a hold of you again, Doc, if they have any questions? Or
my email, batushkad@yahoo.com.
Wonderful. We are here with Dr. Dan Edmunds, and this is Make a Change on 94.3 FM The Talker. We'll be right back. Maderi Clinicals, a unique skincare company, has a complete skincare line for men and women. From anti-aging to glycolic and even a clinical line for sensitive skin, Maderi Clinicals is for you. Their number one product? Forgiveness. It's the secret to younger looking and younger acting skin. You can experience the transformation with fewer wrinkles, firmer skin, and a more youthful, radiant complexion. Treat aging, sun damage, rosacea, and more with Forgiveness. Plus, buy one bottle of Forgiveness, get one lip enhancing complex for free. Forgiveness. Apply it morning and night and keep forgiving and forgetting all through the day. Make a change with Maderi Clinicals. Balance, restore, look, and feel new. Maderi Clinicals, a complete skincare company for men and women. Call 866-646-3374 or check out MaderiClinicals.com. MEDERI Clinicals.com. Welcome back to Make a Change on 94.3 FM The Talker. I'm Tom Jenkins, along with your host Terry Martin and our special guest today, Dr. Dan Edmunds.
And Dr. Edmunds is offering an approach built on compassion and understanding and not on oppression. If you really want to know the truth and have someone journey through that road with you, this is the kind of doctor you need to be coming to. And I would like to focus on the article where people are going through extreme levels of depression, any psychological problem, and he talks about how you get lost along the road, along the way, and how he can help you by going down that journey with you. And he doesn't like the idea of just drugging people up so that they can't function. And one thing that he told me about the establishments and how, first of all, this is the best way I can explain it, that if someone is having problems, depression, anxiety, they go and get a doctor appointment, they go to them, but the doctor decides if they by any chance could be harmful to society. And is that the way that I understand it? If they're not exactly harmful, then they just try to sedate them. They don't try to get to the bottom of the problem so that they can be drug-free. And that's what you do.
Right.
You walk that journey.
That is what I see, unfortunately, happen too many times, where the person is just kind of maintained. And I think one of the important things we have to look at, too, is that there are sometimes these grim prophecies, and I would say they are false prophecies made, where they will tell a person that because they have this supposed imbalance, and no one has ever been able to actually demonstrate what a correct balance would look like or prove that there's an imbalance to begin with, but they will tell the person that they have this imbalance and that they have to be a lifelong consumer of these drugs, and if they don't do that, that there's no hope for them whatsoever. And I find that to be a very false concept, and I've seen it with many individuals who were going through very extreme states of mind, very difficult situations, who did recover. Now, this was not an overnight process. This was a very intense process. It required a lot of work and building that connection and gaining an understanding. But the fact of the matter is, these persons did recover. And unfortunately, I've never really gotten a response from anyone in the establishment to answer me as to, okay, well, you're saying these people are imbalanced, but they did recover. So how did that happen? Did they just one day wake up and their brains shifted around? Or no, I don't think that's what it was. It was a more deeper process than that.
In other words, if something happened to them when they were a child, they had bad experiences, and they just kind of went off the deep end only because of that. And if they could understand that that is the point that you're getting to, and if you could take it back maybe to that, what happened to them.
But this theory, this medical model that we are under, and this idea that, okay, everything is because simply of some type of a imbalance, completely exonerates institutions and persons who need to be changing themselves and supporting the individual. So there could be a number of things. So someone goes through a traumatic experience, or you have a child who is in a broken educational system. Well, it's easier to say that the child's brain is broken than to fix that broken educational system. And I think that that's sometimes what is happening, is that we are ignoring the things that are going on in that person's environment and solely saying that there is something wrong with them biologically.
Yeah, and now we are on the mental health side of it. Although, you know, mental health can still be with someone with autism as well. But we were talking about the Ritalin again, and how it shot up dramatically, just being handed out. And if you could explain the ADHD.
Okay. The one thing that I have noticed is that the diagnosis of ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, was rather rare, or at least most people really were not all that familiar with hearing such a term. And it was the 90s that the rate of diagnosis and the rate of giving stimulant medications for this began to shoot up dramatically.
You said it was the decade of the brain.
That was the terminology that was used during the 90s, that the National Institutes of Mental Health labeled it as the decade of the brain. And it was during this period that not that the system wasn't already pretty entrenched, but it got even deeper into this medical model and the idea of the chemical imbalance theory and so forth. And you saw, not just with stimulants, but you saw a number of other medications that they're shooting up as well.
It just became so easy, it seems, for mothers and fathers or parents to go to the doctor and just say they can't make their child mind. So immediately, the easy answer isn't to go back to say, okay, what's happening with this child? Is it something that's going on at home? And it could be something that's going on at home, and it would be hard, possibly, for a parent to have to look back and see maybe it's something that they're doing.
Nobody wants to admit fault. Nobody wants to stand up.
But maybe they didn't know it.
You have to also look at the conflicts of interest and the ways that some of these drugs are being approved, and I think we have some major problems there. What we're seeing happening now is an increasing rate of the use of antipsychotic drugs, even in young children. And some of these have some very adverse effects. One of them was Risperdal, which this was causing lactating breasts in males. You had Zyprexa, which was one that there was a settlement where persons who had no history of diabetes were developing diabetes. So I think, and it's all off-label too. That we have a lot of this off-label, and I don't think that people are really understanding how powerful some of these drugs are.
Well, you did mention the 1999 Columbine, and you were talking about is there a possibility that these drugs are what is is taking these children over the edge.
Well, as I said, we had what was called the decade of the brain, and we saw this massive increase in the use of these drugs. Now, there's a number of the SSRI drugs, the antidepressants, that they have a black box warning, which indicates that for children and young adults, that these drugs can possibly produce suicidal thought and violent behavior. So we know this. So the question is, it's not to say that the individuals themselves may not have been already going through some type of disturbance. But the question is, was taking some of these medications, could that have been the factor that sent them over the edge? And I think that's something that we need to explore more, because the fact of the matter is, if you examine those that have been involved in school violence, all of them were taking something. So it didn't help. So it's something that I think that we have to explore and kind of question, okay, is there something going on? Are we dealing with the aftermath of this decade of the brain? And when you look at how things line up and the timing and so forth and all the factors, it really does cause you to question.
Well, tell us about your dissertation of the 20 children on drugs, 20 children off.
Right. In my dissertation, I took a group of 20 children, and I had 20 others. These were all children who were labeled with some type of disruptive behavior disorder. For the one group of 20, they were on stimulant medications. The other 20 were not, and were using a behavioral program. So we looked at, over a course of 4 months, with various measures, what their progress was. And we found that the group that were using the behavioral program actually did fare better than those that were simply taking the medications. So I think it's important to also look at that there have been other studies as well that they say in the long term that you don't find any improvement in academic achievement between medicated and non-medicated children who are labeled as ADHD, and really in the long term as well, as far as any real behavioral progress, there is limits to that as well. So, and then with antidepressants, you see that they are only slightly better than a placebo. So really some of these things that people are thinking, okay, this is going to be the answer, this is going to be the solution, really are not, and is opening the door to a lot of potential adverse events as well.
So you really feel that people are ignoring and not dealing with the aftermath of these drugs. They're not really looking into what's going to happen.
Right. Well, I think that's the issue, that we have a vast over medication within our society, and I think we really need to look at that and say, okay, why are we going in that direction? And I think we need to alter our course.
Why are we? Is it possible kickbacks to the pharmaceutical world? What is it that the doctors so easily seem to hand these out? It's like the cure-all, but it isn't. And I'm only talking about children now, but I didn't discuss that with you, but it isn't just children. You're talking, you have adults too. Are you?
Right.
Your practice is
that is correct.
Everyone.
Right. That is correct. Yes, I do think that there is a unfortunate alliance between the pharmaceutical industry and the establishment, and that does shape highly the prescribing practices and the way that people are being treated.
Well, you explained to me about new drugs for existing disorders, how if you could explain that. I thought that was pretty interesting how they are doing this.
This is kind of how I have looked at it, and it's unfortunate to put it this way, but this is kind of where it's at. That actual medicine, they find new drugs for existing disorders, whereas in psychiatry, it is finding new disorders for existing drugs. And we see that what they call the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is the categorizations of behavior and the various diagnoses, are contained there. The first edition had 50 or so disorders listed. We're now in the 5th edition, and there's over 400 that are listed. And I think that's something that we have to look at too, because I think what is happening now is that we are getting to the point where just common human experience, things that we all experience
and need to experience,
are now being labeled as some type of pathology. And I'm convinced that probably at any point in time now, a child or adult could probably be labeled with at least one or more of these various disorders that are contained in the DSM. Because, like I said, that a lot of just basic human experience is now being looked at as a disorder.
Just being human, when we had a problem in the past, we just dealt with it. And now people don't seem to be able to deal with it, or they think if they feel depressed that there's truly something wrong with them. My feeling on that is our human body is never going to be perfect. So if you have a stomach ache, you can expect you'll have that. You can expect in your lifetime you'll have a headache. Why can't you expect in your lifetime you'll feel melancholy or depressed or down at times? Isn't that just part of being human? So maybe people shouldn't so easily or tackle it, read about what they can do to help themselves, or go out and start something new without just running to the doctor all the time, wanting that pill for the answer, because a lot of times that is what they do. And if they don't get the pill, they're mad.
Right.
But it never, like you say, it's not lasting. And that's what attracted me so much to your article, because he hits it head on.
And this is a perfect opportunity to say we got to take one more break, and when we come back and wrap up the show, we can hear different things that we can do, alternative ways that we can actually make these changes in us, with help sometimes. So you are listening to Make a Change with Terry Martin as your host. I am Tom Jenkins. Our guest, Dr. Dan Edmunds, is in the studio, and it's all about mental health this week. And you are right, Terry. I'm fascinated and just I want this to be longer than an hour. So we will be right back on 94.3 FM The Talker. Stick around. Mederi Clinicals, a unique skincare company, has a complete skincare line for men and women. From anti-aging to glycolic and even a clinical line for sensitive skin, Mederi Clinicals is for you. Their #1 product? Forgiveness. It's the secret to younger looking and younger acting skin. You can experience the transformation with fewer wrinkles, firmer skin, and a more youthful, radiant complexion. Treat aging, sun damage, rosacea, and more with Forgiveness. Plus, buy 1 bottle of Forgiveness, get 1 lip-enhancing complex for free. Forgiveness. Apply it morning and night and keep forgiving and forgetting all through the day. Make a change with Mederi Clinicals. Balance, restore, look, and feel new. Mederi Clinicals, a complete skincare company for men and women. Call 866-646-3374 or check out MederiClinicals.com. MEDERI Clinicals.com. Welcome back to Make a Change on 94.3 FM The Talker with your host, Terry Martin. My name is Tom Jenkins. In the studio today, talking all about mental health, autism, and how we can make that change, is Dr. Dan Edmunds.
I was thinking about all of the medical mistakes that were made years ago, and I'm talking about like on the medical side, when they even did bloodletting, and people actually died. So where am I coming up with this? I'm saying that even years ago, they did a lot of things with our mind? What was it that they did? The electric shock treatments to find out now they actually hurt people.
That is still done.
And so we could be making mistakes.
Electroshock therapy still done today?
It's still done, but they use an anesthetic, which simply makes it more so that no one is seeing anything disturbing, but it's still the same process. I think it's interesting. We have to look at that each generation of psychiatry had its theory of the day, and sometimes combined to that theory were some pretty brutal treatments. So initially there was a concept that what is termed mental illness was caused by improper blood flow to the brain. So they had a device where they would strap a person into a chair and they would be swiveled to somehow redistribute the blood flow. Then later we did have the era of lobotomy, and initially this was touted as that this was a wonderful thing because people were no longer being a bother to others, that they were completely docile. So for many years, people were saying, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with this. But by the time they realized that there was a serious problem here, it was basically too late and many lives had been damaged. Now, I think that's interesting, too, that in the medical professions, you do not hear of any type of survivor movement except with psychiatry. And that is a large movement of individuals who believe that they had actually been more harmed than helped by the system.
Well, you might wonder why I brought that up, and it's because I feel that you, Dr. Edmunds, are more on the natural side, and you're filling people with hope. And it isn't all doom and gloom with you. Actually, I see a lot of happiness and an end at many times to what is really happening. But we do want to make sure that we say that this is nothing like Scientology. So you might want to explain that. Put you on the spot?
No, but that is a question that I unfortunately have received many times over, that if anyone is critical of what is going on in the field today, then automatically there is sometimes that assumption made that, oh, well, they must somehow be tied with Scientology. Because the Church of Scientology just happens to be a very vocal critic of psychiatry. So I can say I am definitely not tied into Scientology or have any interest in practicing Scientology. It's basically that the only thing that I can say that I would share with them on is, but not entirely, is that some of the critical viewpoint. But I would say that it really doesn't matter what group it is. If it was Muslims or a Christian group and they are speaking out about the same things that are happening and that are true, then I could easily say, okay, that I'm in agreement with those groups. So it's not any connection to a particular religious ideology. It's just looking at things for what it is.
So if someone wants to come to you, again, you could give us the information how to contact you online, again, where your offices are. Maybe you want to explain a little bit about what it would be like for someone to come in. What can you do? How can you help someone?
Okay. Well, the email is batushkad@yahoo.com. I have the website on selfgrowth.com, so they can look up my name there and the information will come up, and it has a number of articles and past interviews and so forth. I see people in Tunkhannock and in Kingston, and basically the work that is done, I look at it is making a connection with that individual and journeying with them, of creating a safe place where we can meet together, and to realize that And I look at it in this way, that no one is broken. And because a person is going through distress, I'm looking at it as this is part of our common human condition. So I am there simply, and that was why I titled my book the way I did, is the meeting of two persons, of two people just coming together, sharing in the human experience, and if one may have gotten a little bit lost along the way, that to be able to grasp their hand and lead them back to a safe place.
In a generic sense, how could people listening right now, what different things could they do to help themselves make a change, mentally for them? You had spoken, Terry especially, we're talking about, being part of the human condition. We get depressed. We get happy. We get mad. We get sad. We get lonely. We get overwhelmed. We get panicky. We get anxiety. This is just part of being human. What different things can we do to help ourselves get through those situations safely, if you will?
Well, the one thing that I will say in this regard, because as I mentioned earlier, that I look at that a lot of the things that cause us distress are products of what is going on in our society to begin with. So that's one of the starting points. And I think another role that I have to take on is the role of an activist. That if I am wanting people to have mental health, to be what we would term emotionally well, then I need to do something about those factors that are causing that distress. So I need to be involved in social change, in doing something so that, because I think that if we did not have all of these pressures and distressing things within society, then people would not be in the situations that they are. Now, as far as more practical things to implement, I think to go through periods of introspection, to the use of meditation, I think is very helpful to be able to also create a support network. So if we are feeling some type of distress, whatever it may be, to make sure that we have individuals that we can share this experience with, so that we're not closing ourselves off. Because I think that can be a very dangerous territory, is when we are kind of shutting down and shutting ourselves away from other people.
Seclusion, yeah.
Then we start to, that's when people start to kind of get lost.
Well, we are coming down to the very end of the show. And one more time, how would people get a hold of you, Doctor? BATUSHKAD@yahoo.com. They can look me up on the selfgrowth.com website. Just type in your name, Dan Edmunds.
Right. I have a profile there, which has a lot of information, articles, so forth. Or also on psychologytoday.com. They can go there and they can find my previous articles that were written there.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being part of the show this afternoon. We definitely appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Very, very educational and eye-opening. And hopefully it helps a lot of people to at least start to make a change. I am Tom Jenkins, along with your host, Terry Martin, and you are listening to Make a Change on 94.3 FM The Talker. Feel free to give Terry a call at 866-646-3374, or you can check out MederiClinicals.com. Thanks again for listening, and have a great weekend. Mederi Clinicals, a unique skincare company, has a complete skincare line for men and women. From anti-aging to glycolic and even a clinical line for sensitive skin, Mederi Clinicals is for you. Their number one product? Forgiveness. It's the secret to younger looking and younger acting skin. You can experience the transformation with fewer wrinkles, firmer skin, and a more youthful, radiant complexion. Treat aging, sun damage, rosacea, and more with Forgiveness. Plus, buy one bottle of Forgiveness, get one lip enhancing complex for free. Forgiveness. Apply it morning and night and keep forgiving and forgetting all through the day. Make a change with Mederi Clinicals. Balance, restore, look, and feel new. Mederi Clinicals, a complete skincare company for men and women. Call 866-646-3374 or check out MederiClinicals.com. MEDERI Clinicals.com.